Welcome to the show, Sebastian.
Hello,
Thanks for coming on.
happy to be here.
We tried to do this beforehand. Like I always call people ahead of time just so that we can get the audio tested and everything. So you can hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you all right.
All right, cool.
It's been a long time since we've chatted. When we were used to go to school together, we didn't really hang out as much.
Yeah, well, we had classes together and we like bumped into the hall a lot, but like I don't know. I'm not a very social guy, I suppose.
which is which is very interesting to me. You're not very social, but you do something that requires you to be social at all times.
Yeah, I don't know how that panned out, but I think it's sort of just the way those kind of people are. My friend likes to make a joke. You go into a room full of those kind of people, and all of them are so lively when they perform, but you try to talk to them once they walk off, and they all turn into mice again.
That's
We all
that's
turn into mice again,
That's so
as it were.
fascinating. I named a show. Well, actually, I put on Facebook that I was speaking to you as a performing artist. Is that the right title, or am I completely off on that?
Yeah, honestly, when it comes to the thing we do, being called anything is sort of interesting.
Okay.
Like,
Well, here's the thing, because I don't notice. Like, what I notice is that you don't really have a lot of exposure. Like, you don't tend to promote yourself in a very clear way. You kind of let people, um, induce or like deduce from all the things that you've done and figure out what you actually are. So from what I can tell, Sebastian, I've been following you for a couple of years, is that you are a performing artist that in the sense that you are on stage and you are performing a piece of art.
okay, that's
Um,
fair.
and as a result, like I've always been interested in you, so I've tried to look up some of the work you've done and based on your Facebook and I'd have to actually go out on my own to look for you. Like I Google search you and all that, and I did find a few of your amazing talent, which is like I've never knew that when we were going to school. But you do have a very good performing sort of like air to you, man. When you're on that stage and you're doing spoken word, right? It's a very powerful thing that you can do. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about, uh, I guess, what you do
In terms of spoken word.
in terms of spoken word or anything else that defines you right now as you are now. How old now?
Oh man, it's so bad. So many people recently been asking me how old I am, and I got to do the math every single time. But I'm pretty sure the answer's still 27 now.
Okay, fair enough.
Uh,
27. What are some defining things that you can talk about when it comes to if I call you a performing artist, do you get offended or do you feel like that's a right way of putting it or
like, I think if you call me a performing artist, I'm like, that makes sense. That is something that I'm literally doing. There are people who like call me poet, and I will admit, the first time I heard someone call me poet, that was like vexing. You know what I mean? Because you're like, that is technically what I'm writing, isn't it? I am writing that, and I am performing it. But when someone actually calls me it, it's just like, oh yeah, that's right. This is real. I'm doing this in front of people, and they can identify me as a person who is doing that.
so you don't
Um,
so from what I can tell is that you don't vexing as in you don't like the fact that they call you a poet?
you know what? It's not that I don't like it. I think it sort of makes me uncomfortable to be acknowledged. I suppose.
Hmm. What would you be
Like
what would be a preferable way of someone addressing you? What would you like to
uh,
be seen as?
I don't know. I think when I'm being like when I'm in a poetry slam, if someone calls me a poet, that's no thing. But when I'm being paid to do poetry, for instance, right? For whatever reason, the moment money changes hands, I'm like nervous now. Like, oh man, they're actually paying for my work because they like it. So I guess that makes me a poet now, right? Like when we're all playing the game, anybody like that's the whole point of the game, right? Like anybody can walk onto the mic, anybody can play, so anybody can be a poet. But then once people start paying me for, it, I'm like, oh, it's real now. Like we ain't just having fun with this anymore. Like we're playing the game for real.
When did you figure out that you were good with words? When did you find out?
You know what? I wasn't even the one who figured it out. Like, I've only been doing this for 3 years, and 3 years, yeah, I guess well, maybe four now. Oh, I'm so bad at math. Point is, only those few years ago, I had a buddy, my buddy Sean. He was like, Sebastian, I think you got a cool voice for this. You should check this out. Linked me a bunch of videos, and I was like, I read a lot of poetry because that's what we did in school together, right?
Hmm.
I never wrote poetry, right? I'm good at poking poetry apart. I'm good at grinding it up until I can see all the bones inside of it. But like I myself never written it, and then someone told me I would be good at it, so I believed them, and I started writing, and by happenstance I happened to be good at it. So I guess like I both found out at that time, but I wasn't the one who found out at first, in a manner of speaking.
What's fascinating about poetry, like all types of writing, is that you can do it in so many different ways, right? So there could be the active reading of poetry, there could be the analysis of poetry, and then there's the act of writing poetry. And what you do, and I think very highly of what you do, you're able to perform poetry. And so, what are those pieces that make, like, what are you good at in terms of, or what do you think that you excel at in any of those categories?
I think my strength will always be in analyzing poetry. I think because of the academic training we both have, I'm always gonna feel confident that of all the skills, I'm probably the best at. Like the one that I feel most confident doing is hearing poetry, and then not so much like understanding it, but being able to like uh, notice the connections that I hope that the writer is trying to show me.
The spoken aspect.
Afterwards, I want to believe my performance is good. Performance and writing is good, but like that's the one I'm most certainly confident of. I would say.
And you read a lot of poetry, obviously, in order to figure out the announcer. It's so funny because I'm teaching a unit on poetry right now, and I really don't know how to introduce it without hearing all the oh and ahs, and because as teenagers, the demographic that I teach, they don't realize the richness of being able to articulate with these words. And it's interesting because being able to use poetry at its highest level is to be able to express things you can't express verbally or through prose.
Hmm.
So, what is it that draws you into poetry? Like, tell me a little bit about like some of the poetry that you've written and some of the successes that you've had doing it, and what got you into it, what drew you in. I guess like
So what?
some of your authors and.
Ooh. So what drew me in was certainly my friend saying, Sebastian, you should give this a try. I think you'd be good at it. But what convinced me was watching videos of the BuzzFeed videos that were going viral at the time too, right? Like this slam poem will change your life, and you can't believe how it ends, sort of thing. But the videos that my friends were showing me were videos by poets like Dan Murray and Franny Choi and Jesse Parent, and then from there started watching more videos, so like Shane Koizan and Will Evans, and then from there we actually started going to poetry slams. So then I started being influenced by the people who I shared space with,
Mm.
and then I had the good fortune of going to national festivals and being able to share space with like all these people who I'd spent hours and hours watching on YouTube, thinking like, man, I'll never be in the same room as like these people, and now I'm getting my ass kicked by them in the game I like playing.
Mm.
And then coming back down to it and just like reading the stuff that I studied in school again, because I'm like, oh, I wanna feel that one again. And
Mm.
now I'm reading poetry by my friends and other people who I've had the good fortune of like bumping into at a show and stuff.
It's so humble the way you approach it, and I can understand how it's such a great, big sort of giant that you have to step up to, right? Do you think obviously there's a huge difference, but what is the major difference between looking at a poet perform on the internet versus performing on stage?
Oh, I think I think it's the case that like a lot of poets, especially the ones you see on YouTube, like on Button Poetry right about now, Slam Fine, you can definitely you definitely can experience the performance, of course, like that's what the whole point of the video. But there are few things more intimidating than understanding how powerful their stage presence is in person, and even fewer things understanding that, knowing that you have to go up right after them. Like my most fond but also awful memory of poetry slams ever was at my first national competition. I'm just like geeking out at the registration because I'm like, oh, that I know I saw that poet online, I saw that poet online, I saw that poet online. Go to our first bout, and we're deciding the order to put all our pieces up against the other teams. By this most random chance, the most disgusting twist of fate, I have to do my poem after a poet named Will Evans. And I'm sitting in that seat thinking, if he starts this poem and the first words out of his mouth are these words, like, I swear in the distance I'll hear my buddy start screaming, and I'm probably going to start sweating, and it's going to be awful. And he walks up stage, says the first lines out of that poem, and I'm like, no, how could this happen to me? That's the poem they got on YouTube. How do I follow this poem that I've watched like 10 times in good conscience? And of course I did my poem afterwards and I got my ass kicked. And all I can think to myself is like, holy shit, I just got my ass kicked by Will Evans. And for the rest of the week I was totally weird about it. But like, it just leaves an impression on you because you're at home, like it's like when you go to a concert, the first time you hear this album, you're like, oh, this album, I really like this album, and you go to the concert and you see it live and it becomes your favorite song ever. Except in this instance you see it live and it's your favorite song ever, and also you have to live with the fact that it kicked your ass.
Getting to perform for the very first time, how did you prepare for that?
I did a lot of like talking to myself during the time I worked in like a gas station, and I worked overnight shifts. And go figure, no one comes into a Canadian Tire gas station at like 4 in the morning, except people who don't want to pay attention to you and don't want to be around you at all, anyways. So for the first like 2 years of me doing poetry, I would spend basically like hours upon hours just reciting my poetry to like the cigarettes while I was counting them, or to like the floor while I was mopping. And it really helped me like memorize them and be confident in the words. But that's certainly how I got prepared for my first time up on the microphone there.
What were those major things that you were considering before you went on stage?
Oh man, why am I doing this? Like, what's my game plan here? Like, I've seen these people on the internet. Like, I specifically went out to the Burlington Poetry Slam because Sean told me that's where Dan Murray slams. And I was like, oh shit, I gotta see Dan Murray live. I have the opportunity to see this guy on YouTube live. And I go there, and he kicks the shit out of me with his fucking awesome Am I allowed to swear?
Do whatever you want.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he kicks the shit out of me with his awesome poetry. And I'm just
This
like...
is the first time you ever went. This is the first
Yeah,
time you
yeah.
performed.
Well, first time you ever go, I walk into the room. I go up to the thing. I go up to the guy with the clipboard. He's like, "You hear the slam?" And I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "What should I put your name down as?" And like, my name, I don't know, Sebastian. And then your name's on the list with all the other people who signed up, and the person who signed up that night was that guy who I'm maybe too interested in because of how good his poetry. Like, I'm just like starstruck and non-communicable for the entire night about. And you just gotta live with the fact that that guy's on the list too, and then you're about to get your ass kicked by him.
Wow. How do they pick these venues? Like, how do you know if it's indoor, outdoor, where it's going to be, and why is it in Burlington and not in, where? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's all types of poet venues and poetry venues, but how do they pick?
It's super grassroots. Like, it's basically, can they find a space that'll be open every month, is willing to let them hold the event there, serve food, like devote a server to that area or something. Like, it's basically wherever there is a community willing to pop up. Like, the reason why the Burlington one exists at all is because the organizer, Tommy Buick, moved to Burlington and said there's no poetry slam here, so he made one. The Toronto ones, I don't know much about the history of the Toronto ones, but like from what I understand, it's just people who said, "Here's a space we can do a poetry slam. This is where it'll be." So I was talking my friend Corey McDermott. He runs a poetry slam. It's called the Swim Slam. It's on the outdoor patio of a Kelsey's because that's the space he could find. Right?
Do they charge for membership, or is there like some sort of fee for you to go and join?
So for just going to a poetry slam, normally you pay like $5, maybe $10 at the door to get in. Some places do that if you came to play, then you don't have to pay. But otherwise, it's a show.
What's
You do have to sign up, and you do have to pay if you are going to a competition. Though I've never done the Canadian festival, but the American National Poetry Slam, you got to sign up for that one.
what's the crowd like, or how do they draw the crowd? I guess they promote very grassroots, like you say. Um, do they? Is there usually? I mean, obviously it depends on, I guess, the event. But on any
Oh
given
yeah.
day, is there a large audience? Do you find that there are lots of people interested in being spectators to this art form?
Oh, certainly. Like in just Burlington, the one that I'm most familiar with, like the Burlington Slam has whole groups of people who are devoted to just being like spectators. They just want to be audience members. They just like listening. And like you go to Toronto, you go to the Drake Hotel, the Toronto Poetry Slam. The entire room is like standing room only. So like not all of them are poets. So that means a lot of them, or maybe a lot of them are poets, but only 8 of them are going up on stage. So the rest of the room is just there to either be audience or because they couldn't get the list. But the majority of them for it to be standing room only is because they wanted to be an audience member.
Do you have friends that watch you,
Uh,
or is this something that
sometimes,
okay?
yeah, sometimes. I used to.
I'm gonna
Sean
wait.
used to
Hold
come
on a
out
sec.
with
I'm
me
gonna
a lot.
interrupt you, Sebastian, because I
Sure,
find that
sure.
this is an interesting case because I've only started this show recently, and I find that because I'm interested in doing something like this, that many of my friends aren't interested in. It's very hard to get validation or approval from my group of friends. So when I ask you, it comes from a personal place. Like, do your friends come to support you, or do they come and watch you? I feel the same way. I think my friends go to the best of their ability to come and support me, but they have their own grind. They have their own thing to do, and
Yeah.
so yeah. How do you feel about that?
Honestly, it's like whatever. Like I get it. We all got our own stuff to do, and like especially when it comes to poetry slams, like I'm not gonna like if someone doesn't want to spend the next 2 hours like feeling all of these emotions and hearing all of these really like I mean not all of these, but the so many potentially really heavy stories. Like I get that. Like poetry slams are or rather they can be an emotionally exhausting experience.
Right.
So I'm not. If people don't want to come out to that on the regular, I totally understand that. And honestly, like whenever I perform in front of people I know, it always makes me nervous. Anyways, because like, oh cool, I'm gonna see you on Monday. You can tell me now. Now you know this vulnerable thing about me where I go to a place and I am honest with people who I might never see again. Cool.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you. It might be interesting to tell me a little bit about what the difference would be going to a spoken word performance versus going to a battle performance between rappers.
Oh,
And I
honestly,
guess like can you try to explain to me the difference and sort of like the nuances between spoken word and battle rap?
you know what? I'm hilariously inept at making that comparison, but I do because like
Oh,
I myself have no experience with battle rap.
hmm,
I actually know that the poets that make up the Hamilton team, or rather they were alum of the Hamilton team, Kevon and Eddie. They both said they got their start in battle rap, um, and like I wouldn't be able to like tell you how they felt, but at the very least, the thing I can say about poetry slams I mean, this might not be the case for all of them. I suppose like every poetry slam is its own community, every room is its own space with its own feel. But the majority of poetry slams that I go to, I think all of them are they all sort of strive to create this space where you feel safe sharing. And I think across all of the rooms that I've had the great fortune to be in, that is generally like the feeling that all of them either are aiming for or attain, I think.
Yeah, battle rap is quite toxic. It can become quite toxic.
Oh, I can imagine.
I
I mean, it's all about making fun of each other.
Yeah, I find that like watching more battle rap is a little bit easier than watching spoken word for me personally, because spoken word is so emotional and it hits
Yes.
parts where you might not necessarily want to hear that affects you, whereas battle rap is more like person is projecting on another person and you can kind of have that deflection go down, you know what I mean?
Yeah, one of my favorite things about watching battle rap online is like when I'm watching spoken word, it's like, yeah, I'm like, well, I'm connecting to this person's story right now. I'm really like feeling something here. But with battle rap, I'm just like, oh my god, that guy got dunked on. That was a sick line. That guy just how do you walk away from that one, right? Whereas, yeah, definitely.
From that angle, then spoken word, there should be no such thing as bad spoken word then.
I think I think it's a funny thing, spoken word and poetry slams. I think when it comes to poetry slams, uh, the game is made up. Like the points and the judging are all done essentially at random, right? Like it's random people in the room assigning an arbitrary number to something as intangible as a person's told story through oral performance. Like we can critique that, but sometimes it's not about critiquing it so much as it's like respecting that person's bravery. Because like I say this as a person who's super duper competitive and likes playing games a lot, which is why I like poetry slams because the game is fun. But also I go into these spaces because I like playing the game. But I also go in knowing that not everyone's there to play the game. They're there to be brave again, and I get that. So like, just because you're brave doesn't mean the poem's good either, though. So when it comes to poetry slams, like there is certainly like a gradient on like craft and skill that goes into the work, but which is why like it's a weird distinction to make between, for me I suppose, that I try to like understand myself, where there's poetry slams and there's spoken word, and the spoken word can be crafted and it can be beautiful, and a poetry slam can be crafted and it can be beautiful, but I think spoken word specifically does its best to like do what's best for the art, whereas poetry slams try to do what's best for the performer on stage.
Can you explain to me what that difference is? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So it's not that there can be no bad spoken word. I think there can be bad spoken word. Like you can make spoken word that just functionally doesn't do anything and aesthetically isn't pleasing, but it can still be a good poetry slam thing, if that makes sense, right? Like some of the best poetry slam, some of my favorite things that I've heard from a poetry slam may or may not be constituted as a good spoken word piece, but in terms of performance and emotion, I
Oh.
fell in love with it. And I think it's important that poetry slams aren't necessarily about what is a good spoken word piece. I think good spoken word pieces can exist. There are tons of them, but I think there can be bad ones, and those are the ones because that's it's like saying there could be no bad poetry. In that technically probably not, but there's always something we can improve. Like I think I think maybe it's the case that we should be able to accept that sometimes our most important and emotionally vulnerable things can still be expressed poorly, but it's not that the story is bad, it's just that the way we told the story could have been better.
W- Why use poetry to express ourselves when we can just use prose?
Honestly, I'm not sure I understand yet either. I think one of the things that lends poetry to I think what makes specifically like slam poetry, so appealing to express yourself with is the inherently like autobiographical tone to it. Whereas in um, prose sort of has the implication of fiction. Like with prose, the writer could be anybody trying to write about anything. But I think the way spoken word and poetry slams currently work is that there's always the expectation that the story being told on stage is the story that belongs to that person.
Mm, that's very
Because
interesting.
I think I've seen people like even when even when people try to do like a persona piece where they're very clearly trying to inhabit a body or a character that isn't themselves, they're still trying to tell their own story just through that mouthpiece. And perhaps that's also the case with prose too. But with prose, I think they're more upfront about the idea of like this is a character, this is fiction. Whereas poetry slams and spoken word are more about like personal experience, or they can still be like part fictitious and hyperbolic and metaphorical, but all of those things are for the purpose of the personal experience more than the fictional metaphor.
Do you practice with your colleagues or do you practice alone occasionally?
Funny thing is I mostly practice alone nowadays, mostly because you only really practice with a team when the team is going to a competition or when they got a gig coming up. So right now, Burlington team, for instance, that I'm normally associated with, they will be holding their finals next month to decide who will be on the team that year and who will be going to represent Burlington at the national festival that they
So
normally
this is
go
coming
to.
up. This is a competition coming up,
Yeah,
and you're preparing for it.
no, because this year, I did not meet the requirements to qualify for finals. You have to participate a certain number of times and a baseline amount of times, and then from there, you get an invitation to finals. Because the idea is that they don't want someone just like coming up out of nowhere who's looking for a ticket to the festival, right?
Right.
They want to show that at least somebody who is invested in the community, not just showing up to try and take a spot.
Can I ask you why you didn't perform as many times this year?
Uh, so at my last national festival, um, this story is sort of embarrassing, but also I've tried to like own up to it recently because I feel like it's been really important to me, both as a person and as a poet, which sounds so cliche, but it's like actually true for me. Um, is that like this is my third time making the national festival with the same group, and part of me is thinking to myself like, all right, this is my third time. Like I'm confident in my stuff. I've been putting in a lot of work. I really want to show these people who I only get to meet through these festivals how much I've grown in the last year because I just want to show them that in the year that I haven't seen them, I really this year tried really hard to do something that would hopefully like impress them, like make them happy to see like, oh man, I'm so glad Sebastian was working hard because like I wanted to show them that like I was excited to meet them again, and I had like the worst meltdown. Like I had the ugliest cry in public because like I didn't meet my own expectations on what I wanted to do. Like I wanted to show everybody how happy I was to see them again by showing them all this new work that I've written. And instead all I did was just like publicly and ugly cried. And when I came back, like I really tried to think about why did I feel so bad about something I was so excited for? And I guess during the period where I was thinking about that, I was also taking to heart the advice my teammates gave me. And instead of the schedule I tried to keep for myself before, where prior to all that, I was always writing like 3 to 5 new pieces every single month, practicing them, getting maybe 3 of them off paper and memorized, and then I would like dump them and write 3 or 5 new more ones for the next month. Like I really put myself on a schedule where I really wanted to show how much I improved over a year, and I realized that I wasn't giving any of my individual pieces the time they truly deserve to become like polished things that I could proudly show to people. So when I came back from the festival, I was re-examining my own expectations of myself. I was re-examining the work ethic that I thought was so important. Like I thought it was so important to always be writing and always making new things. And I just ended up taking more time with each individual piece, and I stopped coming out as much because I was like, I'm not ready. If the problem before was that I was rushing these pieces up too much, I'm gonna take this month off. I'm gonna figure out how this piece works, and it'll be ready for next month. And I would say this month after month. So I managed to just not be able to produce enough work to show up when I wanted to show up.
I'm gonna put that on hold for a sec. What is the writing process for you, my man? I appreciate. Thank you so much for talking about that, man. It means a lot. Um, what is the writing process for you? What does it look like?
So when I was going real hard into it, my writing process would honestly be like every morning, wake up, like try to write something out of my brain in those first like 15 minutes where I'm like too groggy to really consider like a coherent thought, but just groggy enough where I'm not going to be self-censoring myself. Write something in those first 15 minutes, then like
What does
go to
self-censoring
work.
mean?
Like I think one of the biggest problems, especially as anybody gets older when it comes to learning any new skill, is that we always think to ourselves, I'm not good at this. I don't want to go through the period of being bad at something in order to eventually be good at it, right? Like when we're older, I think we're so scared of starting new hobbies because we're all older now. We're so centered in who we think we are as people that we're really scared to put ourselves in situations where we might be bad at something and have to re-examine. Am I just bad at this? Am I bad at this thing, and therefore my entire character is bad, or like, can I understand that I just started a new hobby and I have to suck at it at first in order for me to get good at it eventually? So in the morning, I try to write because I figure in the morning I can be honest with myself, at the very least, just not be awake enough to say like, don't write that, that's bad, or that line's not good or something. Just write something down. Doesn't matter if it's bad, doesn't matter if it's good. You just have to be able to get your brain to do something even if it's not inspired to do it. Because if you only ever wait to write something when you're inspired, you can go forever without writing anything. And then what are you? Are you still a writer? So you got to write something even when you don't want to, and then who knows? By putting yourself under these constraints where you insist to yourself, "Oh, I can't do this. I can't do this," your brain will somehow come up with a solution, and you'll do something that at first looked awful, but when you come back to it again, you're like, you know what? That's an idea. And I would do this every morning. I would write something down, think about it during the day, come back, and be like, "This is the one that I'm going to write," and then I would expand the idea. Or sometimes I would think about it, come home, and say, "I got nothing," and then wake up the next morning and try again. And try to get as many of these done in like the first week or two, and then spend the next week getting it off paper, perform it, and then start writing again after I perform it. Nowadays, though, it's more just anytime where I'm like not distracting myself on like if I'm riding the bus, if I'm walking to work, if I'm getting a coffee, anytime where I'm not distracting myself with something like music or whatever, I'm just thinking to myself, I just start writing things down because again, if you don't write when you're not inspired, you're just gonna never write anything. And hopefully during these periods of just me thinking, I find something that I like and then I'll expand that later.
What is the transition from writing to speaking? How do you do that? Like
Uh,
I know that you're very emphatic when you perform, and I'm not sure if you notice, or actually if it's on purpose or not, but you tend to know how to hit certain tone. Like if there's a certain tone when you deliver it, it's almost like it means like you've practiced. Like it seems very practiced. So I'm not sure if you've done it, or is it completely natural? I don't know.
you know what? It's honestly a little bit of both. Um, Certainly when I first write something, I just try to read it off paper and get a feel for it. Like when I'm first writing it down, part of me thinks to myself like, "Oh, I know how I want this line to sound when I read it out loud," or like sometimes I'm running down a line like, "Oh, this one's gonna sound real cool when I say it this way." But basically, once I have it all together, I just read it out loud off the page and try to see where my voice naturally goes with it. See what story it is I'm truly trying to tell here. Because like once the words are on the page, that's one thing. But then once you're trying to explain it to somebody else with your words, you realize like, oh, I may have written this, but what I actually meant to say like was this.
Hmm.
And based on that, I'll like follow. how it's supposed to feel and then match my inflection to it. And then once you get that, well, once you figure out the way that you sort of like it, just try to run it as many times as possible and try to maintain the same feeling of performance so you can try and match your voice to the previous performance until that's just what it sounds like.
Hmm. Sounds very complicated.
I don't know. It's easier. It's really intuitive when you're doing it. Like you read it the first time, this is what it sounds like. Oh, I think it should sound like this.
Right.
So I start reading it like that, and then you start reading like that enough times until you don't need the paper anymore, and that's just the way those words sound.
Do you record yourself?
Sometimes I found
Huh.
that when I record myself, I put myself to sleep.
Huh.
For me, the most useful thing is just talking my way through it.
Do
I
you
think
listen
I
to
think for
yourself?
me, listening is too passive.
You don't listen to
Hmm?
yourself then.
When I listen to myself, I don't know. Part of me just like tunes myself out.
Huh.
So I try to like listen to myself. When I listen to myself, I listen to myself when I'm like talking, which I suppose isn't the most like accurate way to figure out how my voice is carrying through the room. But wherein I'm mostly trying to chase the way the word feels to me. I hope it comes out in the words when I speak it. And also, this is the benefit of having a team. One of the best parts about being on a team is being able to like go through this process with other people in the room, and they can make those pointers for you.
Hmm. So then you're not very digital then, because if you were to do that, I would think that the right path would be to spread your word and your performances a little bit more on the internet, because that seems to be the best way to get exposure. However, from what I've been trying to see, like you keep that on the download. In fact, you spend a lot more time sharing what you are inspired by, I think, and things that are entertaining to you, as opposed to your own production. And I don't know if you can speak to that, or am I wrong on that? And
Huh. Yeah, I think it's like what we talked about before, when like on one hand, I am proud of the things that I've made, you know, but on the other hand, I always look back at it and I say like, I could have done this differently, or I could have done that differently, or like, why did I tripped over that line, sort of thing. So when it comes to like sharing those things, um, the part of my brain just thinks we'll share the next one. We'll share the next one when we nail that performance for real. But of course I say that, but like there are plenty of people who watch those videos and say they like them.
so on the one hand,
Um,
I feel like you're doing it for your own sort of uh, judgment and your own uh, expectations. You're trying to break your own expectations. But on the other hand, the one of the major reasons why you didn't perform, or you aren't going to be performing this month, is because you were trying very hard to do it for the spectator.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That is definitely true.
So I guess what is the middle ground? How do we how do you go about without worrying about yourself or the other person, and just be in the moment? Because I feel like that's what drew you in the first place, is the emotions that spoken word does for you.
You know what? It's hard. Like it's super duper hard. Like I think where I'm at right now is that I've actually written a lot of pieces, but like these are pieces that I never like plan on reading on a mic. But I end up sharing these pieces with the people who I'm like most excited for them to see them. You know what I mean? Like part of me thinks that I'm getting to the point right. I mean, maybe not getting to the point, but maybe where I am right now is that like part of me recognizes that part of me super duper recognizes that I've been thinking too much about what I want other people to see and not enough about what I want to make. And as a consequence, I just sort of end up separating those things. So there are still some pieces that I write specifically with the intention of like, I'm gonna put this on stage, and I hope people like it because I want them to be entertained, and I want to like share something that makes people smile or something. And then there's other stuff that I write specifically for me, and I'll share it with only a few people because I'm like, hey, I know you seem to like my things, so please let me share a thing with you because I wanna make things for people that still make them smile and stuff. even if it's less people, and I actually know how to deal with the consequences of them knowing that I write these.
You cut out a little bit at the back, but I wanted to say that on the spoken word is so powerful, but it is also at a slight disadvantage from the other arts in terms of like you don't record your spoken word. Spoken word is done live, and it's almost like correspondent to how many opportunities you get to do it live. And the less you do it live, unless you have an audience, which is much harder, and the sort of the footprint to get there is much harder than if you just did a song or a rap that you could record, and that could go sort of disseminate much easier. Whereas yours is definitely a more rare craft. I think a lot of it's a very bold craft, I think, and that's why I have a lot of respect for that. It's much harder.
Yeah, I think that's actually like part of the magic I really like about it. Like part of me knows that there are some pieces that I've written and I did a performance of it and my brain just clicks, "Oh, this is the best performance I will do of this piece probably ever."
Wow.
And it's like it just wells up in your chest and you're like, "This feels so cool." Like I feel like like I've conjured a spell before myself. Like
Wow.
this is a once in a lifetime thing.
That's cool.
Like I'll never be in the same frame of mind to make this performance happen again, no matter how many times I practice it, perhaps. Or like when you're on a team, there's like this quiet magic knowing that when you write a piece with multiple poets, that you might never get to perform this piece ever again because you might never be in the same room as that poet again. And like part of that is so sad because like that piece is fun or like I really like performing with that person. But part of it is like really cool because it's like a secret and it existed in the world and you and that person and whoever happened to be in the room at that time are the only proof that this magical thing that you two made or more exists. And I don't know, that's part of the appeal for me, I think.
Super
Or
cool.
of the many appeals. Like it's just really cool.
It goes right against the grain of the current era that we live in of digital age and everything being recorded and accessible by everyone.
Hmm.
It's almost as if, that kills that spellbound feeling that you get from doing it live and doing it with spontaneity and it's almost ethereal, like it can disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like do you remember watching Avatar: The Last Airbender cartoon?
I've seen clips of it, yes.
One of the cool things I think one of the cool things about that show is like it's about like the kid who's got to control the elements to like beat the bad guys, right? In that show, there are people who control fire, air, earth, water, but there are people in that show who are so good at controlling the one element they can control like an advanced form of it. So the most iconic perhaps are the people in the show who can control fire. Uh, Fire comes from emotion. So the idea is that if a fire controller person, a firebender, can focus their emotions well enough, instead of producing fire with their martial arts, they can shoot lightning. And the first time that happens, and basically every other time it happens in that show, you know if a person produces lightning, that's amazing. That's magic. And every time lightning is produced in that show, it's so dramatic and important to the plot because you just learn how much emotion is bubbling under the surface for this character, and the only way they can let it out is by like literally frying the air around them.
Oh,
But then when that show ends, we get to the Legend of Korra, and it's not that the Legend of Korra was like a bad follow up or anything, but we get to the future, and it's like the whole world that the show inhabited has like time skipped, and now they're like in this industrial age, and in this world like firebenders who control lightning, they make energy, they produce electricity for the city, and that by itself is really amazing when you think about it. Like the metaphorical weight of this entire city being powered by these quiet and angry citizens who are just channeling their pure rage into something so utilitarian and useful is really cool. But also, it's like playing Dungeons and Dragons and being an accountant. You know what I mean? All this amazing power and and flashiness. So the lights can literally turn on.
What do you intend on doing in the future, and where do you see yourself? What are some goals that you have that match up to what you believe is success in this field that you're in?
Hmm. Um, I think
I'm
success in
giving
this
you the
field means
genie
a lot of
question.
different things to a lot of different people. I think I think I have I don't think I have any desire to figure out a way to like monetize or commercialize what I'm doing. I don't know, like part of me might always be weird to the idea of like making money off these things that are so personal to me.
Hmm.
But not that I have anything against it, but part of me just like I guess just can't rock it. Like it just it's alien to me. I don't know how my I don't know how I would ever like parse that for myself.
Hmm.
But in terms of like success, I think the things that I want to do is be involved in the community. Like I still want to produce stuff and like I want to share work with people. Like I want to collaborate with people who get me excited to write things I never could have written alone. I want to not that I want to be published, but so much as I want to have like I want to just put a chapbook together and just give it to the people who who put up with my work. You know what I mean? There are people who, for whatever reason, enjoy the things that I do, and who like, as much as I keep telling myself like I'm my worst critic, these people like support the things that I do. So I want to share the work with them because it makes them happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I went negative on a chapbook, but I give it to the people who I wanted to give it to, I'd be pretty excited. And like part of me thinks to myself like, just do it. But then part of me also says like, if I'm making this, I want them to be works that I know will like brighten their day. But like, I mean, okay, again, I understand that like if the implication is if I just gave these things to these people, they'd be happy with it. But like that sort of just makes me want to make it as good as possible for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I guess to those ends, that's why I never could get comfortable with the idea of selling that because um, it's the idea of getting something back for it is weird. I suppose
Hmm.
I don't make it because I want something. I make it because it's fun, and I like the feeling of sharing it with people who I like and sharing it with people I don't know too. I guess, but just like sharing it and making people happy and entertained or something. I like putting out that positive energy, I suppose. And I think if I have to measure success in any way in this field, it's how positive I can make it in that way, I guess. Huh.
It's the closest thing I can tell that is somebody's vocation. You're not in it for the money. Definitely.
Oh man, it sounds so cheesy when you put it that way, though.
Well, oh,
Like I'm
no,
not trying to
man,
say it's
it's
all about the art or whatever, because
and
like
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know. I don't want to be that guy who says it's about the art, because like sort of, it's more that it's
Well,
fun. It's super duper
Sebastian, I
fun.
feel like you've stood the time, man. You've been doing this for quite a bit, and if it was about the money, I mean, it's it could be very tough to pursue something that isn't generating that as a priority, right? I mean, if it generates money and it generates it, then that's fine. But if it's not and you're still doing it, it means that it means something more than, and I think that's huge because we've been almost taught that materialism and all these things are important, whereas I find it very
Yeah,
good that you can do. I'm very envious that you have that. You are teaching at the university?
yeah. That's what my day job is nowadays. I work the gas station still on the weekends a bit, but my Monday to Friday nowadays I'm working at the university.
Do you find that informs your work, what you do outside of, I guess, because it seems like it's a very spiritual and um, independent process what you do for spoken word, whereas when you do these I guess real life, you know, money making purpose is to make money kind of deals, unless you fully enjoy what you do. I mean, does that inform your vocation?
Well, I'll say I'll like super duper on record. Like my Monday to Friday is awesome. As much as I'm not like teaching for the board or anything, I think the thing I've always enjoyed,
Nice.
right? Like I thought, yeah. Well, like what I mean is like part of me is like I wish I was on the board, or like I wish I wasn't on the board, but I wish I was teaching for the board, so
Oh,
I could
did you
say
do
like
teachers college
I
as
did
well?
it. I went to teachers college, yeah.
Good.
I went to a U of T.
Wow.
Um, because like part of me really enjoys the idea of like being the teacher and like creating that space to give the opportunity for the next generation to hopefully do better than me with the skill that I'm giving them, which I guess doesn't make sense because like if I want them to do better than me, I would have to teach them a skill better than mine. But the idea is that like I have this one skill and it seems to be writing essays. So I want this one marketable skill I have, which is formal academic communication, and I want it to be useful to somebody. So I want to give it to students so that no matter which direction they go, at the very least, they will destroy the bell curve on every report they write. Like I want them to be in a position where they'll never feel like they're disadvantaged because of communication. Because I think academic communication is the most like alien and bizarre thing ever, and it's got its own weird rule set to it. So it's basically another game, which is why it's fun to play. But also, not everybody likes playing that game, so I just want them to be able to confidently go to any program and know that their communication skills will be good and that they can do the thing that they're actually meant to do. You know what I mean?
Huh.
So to those ends, I love what I'm doing right now because I get to sit in a room with maybe one, two, three students at most and just say, let's look at what you wrote. Can we fix this? Can we make this better? Can we make it so that the other person understands what you're saying and they want to give you the best mark possible?
Hmm.
So I love that stuff. And I guess to that degree, honestly, I think the stuff I do outside informs that more. Like being being in a room full of people who are just happy to hear you tell your story makes I don't know makes me feel like I can be better at listening. And when I'm working with a student, I want to believe that these last few years where I've devoted so much time to being both emotionally vulnerable but still functional. Like I don't just hear all these really heavy things and then just fall apart. I can hear these heavy things and say like, okay, this is what we got to do next then. Like this is how we're going to not so much fix the problem, but this is how we're going to move forward. Like that skill has helped me in what I do currently, where if a student comes to me and they don't know what to do next, I can be like, hey, these are just words. They're just words on a page. We can fix this. Like, you might think that what you've written doesn't make any sense, but I understand what you're saying. And because I understand, then I can help us both get to where everyone understands, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or something. You know, like basically I think more than anything this good experience I've had in the last few years has really informed the way that I do the thing that I do now for money.
For sure, I think academic writing is the toughest thing that most of these university students, freshmen, deal with.
Yeah.
And then where do you get the help? Where do you find the person who can actually articulate that help? Is very tough. I struggled with academic writing for the longest time, and I still do. I still want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like it doesn't matter how good you are, you're always learning something about it.
Yeah. And you know what's freeing is that when you do slam poetry, is that you don't have to follow through with those academic restrictions and that rule set that you say, which is kind of bizarre in its own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was like saying about before, right? Like by putting myself under constraints, by saying like I'm gonna write this, or I'm gonna write about something I don't normally write about, or I'm just gonna write about whatever idea looked good this morning. When I force myself to write in these ways that are not typical or not comfortable, not the way I would have written it naturally, it forces you to figure out a solution, right?
Sebastian, you born and raised in Hamilton?
Funny thing is, I was born in Toronto, but my family moved to Hamilton really, really early.
Mm.
I couldn't say when. Uh, I was like the point of childhood where memory is a funny thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Hamilton, I love Hamilton. We went to school there, and it was a little bit different from Mississauga. A lot different from Mississauga. That's where I'm from, and I guess the city really had a buzz to it. No matter what it was, there was flair to the city. There was like grit. Yeah, I remember going to Gritlit a couple times in Hamilton, and just knowing that you could actually share your. There's so many spaces for people to share their literary voice. Versus, I think when I was growing up in Mississauga, it was more of like, I guess, owning down, settling in, and buckle up. Let's work, right?
Yeah,
Hamilton's the same way, but people still found time to search for their artistic, I don't know, endeavor. So I really enjoyed Hamilton. In fact, it changed my life going to Hamilton, definitely. So, yeah.
I understand that. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's got something to do with the fact that we got like a college and a university, so it's like filled with young people who enjoy art in some form or another. It's an old, like it's a relatively old city with cool architecture everywhere, and got lots of history and culture if you go to look for it. Like we're in the shadow of Toronto, right? A lot of people who like to do art are in Toronto, but they're also over here too because well, there's so many people doing art in Toronto, right? They gotta find more space for all that art. So why not Hamilton, right? Why not this place with all these young people who can appreciate something also young and similarly contemporary,
How
right?
often do you go out and visit or explore some of the art scene in Hamilton?
Not often enough. I feel like that's always the case. It's always the case that like you always could be going out to more art.
I
Like
am so envious that you're on school campus all the time though. Mac, the campus is amazing. There's so many things happening. You can always drop in on some sort of thing that's going down, right?
yes, it's overflowing. It's a lot of fun. I think honestly the last thing I did check out was what was it was the talent show our international program did because they're like you got so many students from out of country like all we do here in this program is really like academics and stuff but we're more than our academics so like found out how many students in the program got like musical abilities and such forth how many of them are uh first time performers and stuff like that and maybe it's not the more formal art or going out to some play or something, but it was real nice to see so many people flex their artistic muscles that way, like people who I spent the year with like saying like, oh hey, got a comma. And then going from hey you forgot a comma to like wow that was a cool song you did there. That's amazing.
Oh, I can't tell you how much I want to do that and how much I want to be in that space, man. I'm so envious. I don't get that. I create it because I am a teacher who has a lot of extracurriculars that you do and you create those spaces, but to be part of it and to actually enjoy it from that level is very different. So,
Yeah, being a spectator in art is a whole other thing, right?
uh,
Like when people just show up to watch the poetry slam, like I get that. Like man, I would do that too if I was less tired all the time and slightly more mobile, I suppose.
well, hey man, I appreciate your hour of time. It was very good. Thank you. You've informed me, and I think of poetry a little bit more differently. And man, some of that. Oh, there were some parts where I was really moved. Yeah. So, thank you very much, Sebastian.
Hey, it was fun thinking about that stuff, talking about that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, it's cool catching up with you. Like I know we were saying at the beginning we were like we were both sort of like I don't know. I was saying that I was specifically a pretty not social guy, but like I don't know. It was nice sharing space with you back then. It's nice making this space with you right now.
We did some cool stuff, man. Those Shakespearean plays. I remember lines, man. As dissolute as desperate, man. Oh man, those were good times. Yeah.
I do remember those times now.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Hey,
Good luck
no
with everything
problem.
else, and keep me posted. I'm gonna follow you on Facebook. I'm continuing following you on Facebook. People are saying that they're gonna stop using Facebook. I think it's still they can take as much information as they want from me. I love Facebook for whatever it's given me. So
Yeah, part of me figures like, man, they got it. They already made out like bandits. Like They're gonna what else can they take from me at this point, right? Like I'm sure I exist in enough databases as it is.
Yeah. All right, man. We'll talk soon. Enjoy.
Yeah, totally. Soon.
Take it easy, man.
You too. Do I just? Do I?
Yep,
Do I?
just end. We'll see you later.
Oh, got it.
Thank you for those of you who dropped in. I appreciate it. And that was a great conversation with a good friend of mine. Well, we used to go to school together, and he came in on the show, and I really appreciated his time. Sebastian Chong. A little bit about the direction of the show. I intend on writing more of a blog for each of these interviews or conversations that I have, because I think it's important that, let me try and get this going here. I don't know if I can. Anyway, I'm going to try and revisit the show and try to make it a little bit more streamlined, in the sense that I want to pay more respect to the people who come on the show. So I will be